Hello and welcome to You've Got to Have Art. I'm Jeff Stote, the host and producer. I'm here today at First Parish Church in Milton. We're going to be discussing a concert that's coming up on Saturday, February the 2nd, a very special concert featuring a silent film, The Kid, starring Charlie Chaplin, accompanied on the organ, just like in the silent era. Once again, Saturday, February the 2nd. So I have on today's program the organist interview, Peter Krasinski. Peter, welcome to my show.
I'm glad to be here, Jeff.
Great.
It's good to be here.
Peter's originally from Quincy, I'll have you know, but his expertise on the organ sends him far and wide. Peter, tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I have been very fortunate in my life that the love of my life has always been music. And sometimes people ask what I do for work, and I say I've never worked a day in my life.
That's great.
Because it's always been play, whether it's been teaching elementary, middle, upper school, and privately. It's always been fun. And you don't say you work the organ, you say you play the organ, or you play the violin, or you play the piano. So that's my basic background. My dad and mom were very supportive of me when I was a kid. There was none of this thing about, you know, you should do this instead because you might be better off.
How often is the complaint that you're practicing too much? I can't imagine that.
Well, I did have some trouble with that, actually. But people ask me if they were musical, and I say, well, my mom played the cello. She played with the Quincy Symphony for many years. And my dad played the radio extremely well. So I've taught in Quincy, and I've taught in Brockton, and I've taught in Brookline. And now I'm pretty much all the time doing this work of accompanying silent films. So
you play and work at is it a church in Providence?
Yes, I'm at the First Church of Christ Scientist in Providence, Rhode Island. It's a very beautiful building with a 1913 Hutchings Vody pipe organ, very wonderful congregation and beautifully taken care of. And there's also, I play at a synagogue in Belmont on Friday nights and Saturday mornings. When I was a little kid, I hated elementary school, and I prayed to God, could I please just have church every day? And it's pretty much happening now, because I've taught for the Catholic Boy Choir School on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I work at the synagogue on Friday nights and Saturday mornings, and then I work for the Christian Scientists on Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings. So be careful what you pray for. You know, it might actually come true.
So tell me about this. I mean, how did you know that the organ in particular was your passion? I mean, when you were young and practicing, I imagine it was on the piano, right?
Pretty much most of the time.
So, how did you know it was the organ?
There were a few things. As I already mentioned, I love church. I guess I was a church mouse, and I grew up at Bethany Congregational Church in Quincy. I remember being a little kid and asking her, gee, you know, maybe at, I don't know, 6, can I play the organ after church? And she said, yes, you may come up and play the organ. And she let me play one note. And then she said, go practice the piano and come back and let me know, and then we'll see if you can play the organ some more. I also had the good fortune of being brought to nifty places by my parents. Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum for artistic things, and also the Boston Symphony. My mother would take me out of school. And there in front of you at Symphony Hall is this big pipe organ. You know, the pipes, you can't miss it. It's just right there. It's something that you see and you wonder about, what is that big machine? And I also had the really good luck of being able to see some of the great silent film accompanimists like Lee Irwin and Gaylord Carter, a number of people at a place in Stoneham Town Hall. They had a Wurlitzer, and I'm glad to say they've restored it again. And I used to go as a kid and listen to this fabulous concerts of not only just theater organ music, but also silent film. And it's always been a passion. Although I played violin I actually had trouble reading music when I was a little kid. And I quit piano, took up violin, got in the Greater Boston Symphony Orchestra, joined the Tanglewood Festival Chorus when I was in college. So there's a lot of music in there.
So thinking about the relationship between movies and music, and thinking about what it was in the silent era and what it became once sound came in. How would you describe this changing relationship, I assume?
Well, the big change is, of course, that live music disappeared. The idea of something live happening while something static at the same time, the film itself. The film is edited, and unless you're talking about editing, the film is done. It's always going to be exactly the same.
But the film is moving too.
The film is moving.
Static, right.
Well, what I mean is a static art form.
Yeah.
It's going to stay there. This next scene's going to happen.
Yes.
It's going to be that scene. It's always going to be the same. It's going to be either black and white or color. It's going to be cut here. It's going to be that many minutes long. The musicians had to accommodate that, of course. They had to try to create music. And there was a whole bunch of different levels of what existed in the silent era. First, when it was just a picture of a train coming towards you, they probably didn't even have anybody playing the piano. But then when a story entered it, they said, well, maybe we need a little something to cover all the coughs and sneezes in the audience and the chomping of whatever it is they were eating. So they get a pianist to play something. And then, as the movie business progressed, there were actually composers that would write themes, and what you'd get a sheet, and the sheet would have the theme for the opening title, then the theme for this scene, the theme for that scene, but it was just one single line of music that had been written out that sort of went with that. There were other bigger movies. When they were epic movies, they actually had a complete score written, and they had a complete full orchestra in the orchestra pit. And you got to remember where that was happening. That was in the vaudeville houses. So they already had an orchestra. It was already there. So they said, okay, we're going to have the film now, and we'll have them play this piece. What happened to this music? Well, a lot of it got lost, because it would, like the sheets I talked about, they would come in the first reel. And they were supposed to be returned back, but very rarely got it back. And there are some people that have made a lifelong passion of collecting those. And the other thing about those compositions were, as wonderful it might be to do it historically and do exactly the way it was done on June 2nd, 1923 in this particular theater, there's a lot of improvisation going on. That part of the art really attracted me as a musician, because I was able to say, okay, I'm not going to have to be subservient to anybody else's exactitude as to what the music's going to be. I'm going to be able to play inspired by what's on the screen.
See, now that's, you mentioned the music covering up people sneezing and all that. I never would have thought of that, because I always think that the music in the silent era, well, I think of silent film acting, and I think of the big expressions to sort of communicate emotion. And I think, wow, what can you do besides the big expressions? And I say, oh, the music. The music must be driving how you want the audience to feel.
And it does drive it. And in fact, when you see, what's fascinating for me is to see movies right after sound came in, because we're still sort of in that world, and I can say, oh, well, that's kind of what people were trying to do. Also looking at these scores, hearing people like Lee Irwin and Gaylord Carter, they recorded their art form in the 70s and the 80s, and we have recordings of them accompanying these silent films, so we know what that was like too. But the other thing that's fascinating is if you hear one accompanist accompany it and another, it's completely different.
Yeah, so that's, you mentioned improvisation, so why improvise? I mean, it's, not to amuse yourself, although I'm sure that happens occasionally, but what service is it doing for the film?
Well, for me, it's this wonderful sort of triptych. You've got the film itself, and you've got the musician and music, but you also have the audience and the venue. Like in this case, we're in this church. It doesn't mean I'm going to be playing hymns while chaplain's falling down the stairs. But the instrument has a certain voice, and I'm going to respect the instrument's voice. Primary is the film, the story in the film. As an improviser, if you're Coltrane or someone like that, you can still hear a little bit of the melody he's improvising on.
That's right.
Every time you hear anybody who's a jazz improviser. The theme is there. For me, the theme is a visual one. And so I'm trying to respect the visual rhythm, the idea that, you know, if two people are having a conversation, we're not going to be touching the trumpet loudly and crashing around on it. If there's a chase scene, we are going to be pretty loud.
Is there music every minute of the film?
There are very few times when it won't be what I like to call the wall-to-wall carpet. You know, and actually in churches, sometimes it's fun to actually do a service like that, to do the tables, to improvise through an entire service where you have everything is filled in and trying to illuminate what's going on in a service or a concert. In terms of the film, silence is very important, however. Using silence. One of the most dramatic sections is an extremely wonderful film called Way Down East with Lillian Gish. It was an extremely popular play in the 1800s. I think Griffith did the movie. And there's a scene where she's got a child out of wedlock. She's trying to get the child baptized, and the child dies in her arms. It's emotional. So the first time I saw this, I went, oh my God, what am I going to play there?
Right.
And then I just realized
I'm
just going to get it softer and softer and softer. And then stop. And then she's there.
Yeah.
The audience gets very emotional.
Yeah, oh, that's great. That's great. So, we're here at First Parish, and you'll be playing in the choir loft. Is that the common setup for when you're doing a performance?
It's pretty much anywhere and everywhere. I like to bring the art of silent film, particularly to places that have instruments of note and that have a beautiful acoustic or a special sort of theme about the building. In this case, we have an instrument that's being celebrated because of the anniversary of the church, I believe. It's a big part of the church. It was a historic instrument when it went in, I think in 1958.
That's right.
And I came up on the scene in 1957. So I feel very close to it in terms of my birthday and its birthday.
Yeah.
So we have a little bit in common. In terms of the setup, it's developed over the years in terms of how I like to do this. Basically, I am going to be monitoring the film in real time while the film is projected so the audience can see it comfortably on a big screen. And while I'm monitoring the film, I'm going to be playing totally improvised. I memorized the film, and I get to know the organ really intimately, so I know what sounds are available and where I'm going to be able to access them quickly so that I can have flow happen. So I don't have to refer to a piece of music or a piece of paper or when does that bell happen? I have to actually memorize it.
But here, your back will be turned from the screen, is that right? So what do you mean by monitoring?
I have a small television monitor, and that will have the exact same picture that's on the screen for me to see in a small screen here. Sometimes I have the luxury of playing in a place where the screen is right in front of me. Recently played Metropolis in a beautiful theater organ in Plattsburgh, and there it was, you know, right there in front of me. It was quite a trip. It felt like I was on a big jetliner. I
will always cherish going to this historic movie theater in Tampa, Florida, and before the show began, a hydraulic brought the organist up, and there was a performance, and then the hydraulic took the organ. I just love that.
I have great news for you.
What?
It's still around.
Is it? Oh, so you know the theater I'm speaking of?
Actually, it's still around locally.
Oh, well, really? Where?
Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh.
There's quite a bit of energy from a number of people to try to get their 5-manual Wurlitzer back in great shape. And I have been...
Do they have a nice old theater for it?
It's a great theater. Yeah, it's the Lowe's Theater. It just celebrated 90 years of existence, and it's known as the Providence Performing Arts Center. And they have big musicals there every year. They have a very nice board of directors that's really takes care of the theater and wants it to be a good thing. And they have this great organ that is on a lift. And recently I've been fortunately asked to come in and play before and after shows occasionally. there. So yes, there are Wurlitzers around, and there are still theaters around that celebrate that wonderful, wonderful energy.
So now that the organ, for the most part, is no longer in movie theaters, is there anywhere besides churches and baseball parks where you might find an organ?
Well, concert halls. There's been a resurgence of organs being restored and then reutilized in concert halls. Boston is one example. Boston has a wonderful Aeolian Skinner organ that was recently restored by Foley Baker, a great company that did a great job getting that organ really elegantly restored. And they use it all the time, quite a bit. You know, if the piece calls for it. They don't add it to things, but I understand that last year during the Pops they used it quite a bit, and there are certain pieces of music that actually begin with the organ as sort of equal with the orchestra. Mahler's gigantic 8th Symphony, Symphony of 1,000, just begins with a big pedal and then a chord on the organ, and then the orchestra comes in. And to hear that roar forth in Boston is a wonderful thing. Other places that, for instance, the Kochmar, difficult name, but up in Maine, this is the City Hall has an organ that's been restored, and people are restoring these instruments. Chicago has a great one. I could go on and on.
Yeah, I myself am a jazz lover, and I love to hear jazz organ.
It's excellent.
It used to be more in fashion, I think, in the jazz world. You don't hear it as much anymore, but it's really powerful when you hear it.
I love it. There was a place up on the North Shore that used to have 2 dueling Hammond organists, and they have a guitarist and a drummer, and I would go there as much as I could to enjoy it. Very fun stuff.
So, sort of the state of the organ today, it has become a more secular world and churches are closing. Does this threaten the number of organs that are still in use?
Well, it depends on the church. If the church is, I like to look to Paris, for instance, as an example. You know, if the church is important, it's going to stay there. And Notre Dame, for instance, has always taken care of its organ as much as it can to a great extent. In this country, if you just watched the funeral of 41, the President Bush, the organ was a large part of that ceremony, and it's an important place. Churches, and in fact concert halls too, and theaters have a decision to make. Is it worth it to keep this big bunch of whistles you know, around? It's expensive to maintain. Some people like to compare organs to cars. I actually think it's better to compare them to houses, because just like a house, you will need to restore the roof, and you do, and it is a bigger investment than a car. At the same time, people who are now only used to the cell phone, when they come to an event like we're going to be having in February, they suddenly freak out because this doing all sorts of things they just didn't think were possible. First of all, they're in a group of people. Second of all, they're watching something that's almost 100 years old and it's still going right here. The movie, The Kid, is a beautiful movie about love. You know, what else do you want, you know?
Less than 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. Really perfect.
Perfect timing. Yeah. Bring your old neck away first. But yeah, it's. I hope I answered the question. But yeah, they're worth saving. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Is and then the instruments themselves. There are great ways to worship in churches, and in fact, in the synagogue that I play at, there's no organ at all. It's an electric keyboard, and we still find ways to do it. But there's a sort of elevated sense that happens with an real acoustical instrument. I prefer pipe organs to electronic organs because, hey, it's real. I mean, I haven't seen anybody give a piano recital yet on a Casio keyboard at Carnegie Hall, and I think there's a reason for that. However, there are some very inventive people that are making great strides in the world of the electronic organ to try to get it to sound as much as it can like a pipe organ. However, it's just nothing like the real thing. The way it shakes, the way it speaks, the way it moves the way the pipes talk to each other. It's a really important difference.
So we now have Peter in his happy place in front of the keyboard here. And Peter, first of all, tell us about this organ. What makes it so special?
Well, the Slicker Organ Company was an amazing choice for this church to make back in the 50s. It was what might be called neo-Baroque, or trying to get the organ to go back to more of the type of organ that Bach would have known, and what organs were for many years before they became romantic and orchestral and symphonic. There's a number of different builders, but in terms of this actual organ, the idea was to kind of have that clarity, to not so much imitate an orchestra as to really be an organ. And so you'll notice that in some of the sounds, it really doesn't sound like it's imitating anything but an organ. Very bright and full. And if you haven't seen an organ before, you'll notice there's all these different sections to it. There's a pedal board, and there's also 3 keyboards, and they all have different sections in the room. For instance, the grate is over there. The choir division is behind the camera. The swell division, these shutters open and close. And that's what makes it louder and softer. And there's also the pedal division, which is very, very fun to play on. With your feet. But this particular instrument with this particular church, they've taken care of it well. It's a really healthy instrument and a good thing to celebrate during its larger celebrations of its history.
So how do you prepare for a silent film? Like, let's say that you're doing a film for the first time and you don't have a score.
Right.
What do you do?
Well, basically I'll look at the film, and as I might have mentioned before, I wasn't quite a good reader of music. I didn't enjoy actually looking at printed music and reading it, but I loved making it up ever since I was a kid, even young. And so it sort of comes natural to me to create some sort of sound about a picture. When I was a kid, I used to paint when I would hear music, and now I'm doing the opposite. I'm making music while watching an image. What I would do is memorize the movie. I'd actually watch it through, figure out, okay, the basic story, who are the characters, is there any special place that has a sort of a sound to it. For instance, are we in some Arabian market where you might have this sort of sound? Is there a love scene? And does that include 2 people getting to know each other? Or is there something a little bit more intense? Is there something perhaps military? And is there in fact something that might even be considered rather dangerous and a little scary?
So the performance itself, you might be thinking, oh, a movie, that's probably a couple of hours. It's actually not. It'll be about an hour and 10 minutes or so. So, you know, let's say an hour and a half, right? Once again, it's Saturday, February the 2nd at 7 o'clock. We sure hope you can make it. And I don't know, Peter, would you like to perhaps play something that you might be playing that evening?
I know that one of the things that we're definitely going to play as a prelude is actually going to be the Bernstein's Candide Overture, celebrating Leonard Bernstein's 100th anniversary. And I can just play a little bit of that to begin, if I can get it to work. There we go. Which is a lot of fun.
So Peter, what was this organ originally designed to play when it was purchased here in the late 50s? What's it designed for?
Well, it wasn't designed to play silent films, and it wasn't even designed to play the Candide Overture by Bernstein.
No, really?
Or any orchestral music. It was really designed to play organ music. And thank God for that, because it's a wonderful instrument. Although it does have imitative flutes and trumpets and a crumb horn, an ancient sort of medieval instrument sound, it still basically is an organ with the sounds of which Bach might have recognized and said, aha, that's a plenum. And for instance, you can actually hear the organ build up. By just pressing these buttons, I can add more rows of pipes. And so that's a very organ sort of sound that you're hearing. And one of the pieces that was actually first played on this organ to what they call open the organ, to welcome the organ into the church, was this piece, Preludium Fugue and Chaconne by Buxtehude. Buxtehude was somebody that Bach walked, they say, 500 miles to study with.
Wow.
So he was an important guy. And it starts with this wonderful pedal solo.
So once again, this is a community concert, a Milton community concert that's going to be on Saturday, February the 2nd at 7 p.m. Tickets, general admission is $25. It's $15 for seniors, and if you're a student, 18 or under, you're free. So bring the kids along. Just in case the event is canceled due to snow, we even have a snow date ready for you. That will be Saturday, February the 16th. Peter, it's been great talking to you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
A lot of fun. Thank you.